What's going on, guys? Welcome back. More commentary for you tonight. Pleased to be joined with Neal Bauer and Rex Dickson, as promised. Guys, do me a favor, take a moment, like button, subscribe button. Criticism for any one of the three of us would be welcomed in the comment section. And as always, you can go over to Twitter, follow me. I am Shutdown Safety. Rex is Rex DEA Football. Neal Bauer is Double Plus Good Games. That was stated as a question you didn't respond to, so I assume it's
good enough.
Obviously, Madden 16 just launched a couple days ago. You guys, hopefully, if you're watching this channel, have had an opportunity to play it and develop an opinion on it. If you have, I hope you shared that with Rex via Twitter or some other way that doesn't involve being mean. But I just want to say to Rex, aside from the game reviews, which you even talked about yourself being overwhelmingly positive, speaking to just the community that you've seen, the breakdowns on Twitter, the breakdowns on YouTube, how do you feel like the hardcore community has received this game?
That's a great question.
That's the only questions I ask, Rex.
I have so many different perspectives and so many people giving me their opinions that sometimes the hardest part of the job is learning to recognize patterns and make the right decision, because you're talking minor tuning changes could significantly impact like the way this game plays and the way this game is balanced. So the one thing that I'm looking at right now, specifically in this moment, is the aggressive catch mechanic, because a narrative started to develop among people who got the game early, and it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's spreading like wildfire, but it's definitely, there's enough noise where I recognize it as a pattern that needs to be investigated, and that is the aggressive catch mechanic being overpowered. That one of the new systems we put in, for one reason or another, feels to people like it's overbalanced or overtuned. And I'll give you a last year perspective here too, which is last year when we did the jump the snap and defensive line mechanics, people were telling me they were getting 6 to 12 sacks a game. And so we had overtuned that system. So it's kind of like when you launch a new mechanic and you really want it to register and sing and make sure that everybody like gets to experience the thrill of it and the wow of it. Sometimes you're a little bit too aggressive with, win chances and very slight dials and tuning knobs that we have. So we're looking at that. And, I think the hardcore community, obviously, I would have preferred a response where they say everything is perfectly balanced, because when the narrative shifts to the aggressive catch is overpowered, everything else gets lost. Like everything else we did is not what anyone is talking about. It's just this whole thing about the aggressive catch mechanic. And I'll give you a little side note here about I told you before I can take a little heat. So I've noticed there's a few people who've started this hashtag, and the hashtag is Hail Rex. And it's in reference to me defending the aggressive catch mechanic as not being overpowered. So instead of the Hail Mary now, they're calling it hashtag Hail Rex.
With my experience with the game, I'll be honest with you, I felt that the rack catch is actually a little bit more overpowered, per se, if we're going to use that term, than the aggressive catch. To me, as you kind of alluded to there, the problem would be, before the game comes out, somebody puts up a video, whether it's a stream or not, and discusses the overpowering of this one catch. And then all of a sudden, you get the game in your hands, you're playing it, a couple things happen. Then all of a sudden, to you, that perception that someone else had becomes reality.
Yep.
And then now there's nothing that can be overdone to go back and say, well, it's not overpowered. To me, I don't think the aggressive catch is a problem. I personally think is the video, I don't know if I've done, that I've done, if you've seen that with the rack catch, it kind of forces separation. And to me, that's the worst thing. Forcing the separation between the wide receiver and the defensive back is a problem. To me, when I want to score, that's kind of what I tend to use. And as I showed you, I can kind of do it at will. It's not 100%, as nothing ever should be, but it can, in my opinion, get more positive results faster than the aggressive catch.
Yeah, so let me address two things there. The first one being that you don't see the aggressive catch as the problem. The reason why it's a problem, and this became clear to me when I started watching Twitch streams during early access, is people who suck at Madden, or what I think they call in the community the chumps. The term is out there, or the phrase is out there, that the aggressive catch mechanics gives chumps a chance, or it gives them hope. So people who don't have any idea how to play Madden can certainly figure out how to do a lob streak and hold Y. There was a really interesting article in one review today. I'll have to send you the link, but there's 2 paragraphs about making this mechanic accessible. Like they talk specifically about leveling the playing field between casuals and hardcore ranked players, and how this mechanic achieves that, but it achieves it at the expense of pissing off all the people who've spent years developing these hardcore click on, steer off pick skills, like the undercuts, the baits, the lurking, stuff like that, stuff that average people just can't do and can't compete against. The second thing, then, let's talk about the rack. Oh, yeah, I wanted to finish that statement about the aggressive catch. So the reason why it really bothers me is I'm sitting in Twitch streams watching these kids, and they get down 14-0 or 21-3 or whatever it is, and then they just start calling PA shot and lob, 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 lob. And it's ass. It's ugly. It's not football. And to think that something that we created is now feeding this kind of response where people are not playing football anymore, they're just throwing up lobs every play, that pisses me off. And that to me feels like a failure of implementation. Now, I know I can't force people to play a certain way, but if I didn't put enough risk in that system to teach them, hey, you cannot do this every play. And there's a number of ways that we could deliver that. I think that's the failure of implementation, is not having enough risk so that people are just chucking it up every play. That's kind of the story on the aggressive catch. Now, the good news is it's easy to tune. All the stuff we need to do is exposed. We just have to test it extensively to make sure that we get it right with the first tuning update. And I think that doesn't have to wait for a patch. That could come pretty quickly. I just want to make sure we get it right before we put it out there. Your second question about rack, there's a few things contributing to that. At a base level, Ryan, you've mentioned this in many videos, the ball being tethered to the receiver, right? We all know, right? The way Madden is architected for a long time now, when they match catches, the ball sort of like animates into the receiver's hands. A system where we could not do that, and we could use things like IK to drive the hands to the ball and have organic, extensions of arms and stuff like that. It's obviously something I absolutely want to do, but it's a fundamental architectural change to Madden. So that's that whole like speed boost thing that you were talking about. The other thing is the speed degradation topic. This has been a very interesting experience for me. Donnie put in this speed decay based on number of years in the league. And I can't remember exactly what the algorithm is, but whatever it was, for every 2 years in the league, we take off X speed rating. That led to some very, very, very bad mismatches in the game. It shows you kind of how fragile the Madden rating system is. And when people say, oh, we want sim ratings, just bring it all down, like the impact of that on the game is absolutely massive, like unmanageably massive. So, the video you had with Mathis, I immediately went and checked how many years he'd been in the league, and it was the same thing. Like we had dropped him probably too much based on his age. And another great example is Brent Grimes from Miami. I think he was down to the low 80s, and you could torch him every play with the guy who had 90 plus speed as a wide receiver. So these are things we can fix in roster updates. And I definitely appreciate where Donnie was going, and I supported his vision of doing it. But it's kind of like the other thing. Like sometimes you get over aggressive in your implementation, and it causes problems in the game. And that's 2 contributing factors to the rat catch problem.
I think to your point with the speed, obviously I know you've heard this before. Speed seems to mean an awful lot in the game. So when you talk about a player losing his value, quote unquote, it seems like the speed is the first thing to go. That makes the player almost useless. The problem with that is, if we can use, Rasheem Mathis as an example, as his speed decreases, he still becomes a very good fresh corner. That's why he's still serviceable. It's why he's still starting cornerback in the league. In my opinion, 5-6 years removed from being a top 10 corner, you have to walk that slippery slope of, when is this player still viable on my roster, and when can I go sign a corner that's just blazing fast and have him do all the things that Rasheem Mathis can do. And that area, in my opinion, is one of Madden's biggest struggles overall. It's the differencing between players that makes you want to select a team, select a concept, go get player X over player Y. speed has always seemed to be the predominant need in the game. Can you speak about maybe how you feel about that, or if there's a way you guys are going to get away from that in the future?
Oh yeah, man. We could talk for a while about that one. Yeah, one of the hardest stats
I
to
guess
get.
the biggest thing would be, not to cut you off, I guess the biggest thing would be, just simply put, do you agree that there's a understanding of multiple people in the community that believe speed is the most important factor to someone in this game?
I absolutely think the game has been structured that way in the past, and it's still huge, maybe even the most important rating, but it's certainly not as bad as it used to be, where you get like a 97 speed guy and you're just throwing, he's beating people every single play. Yeah, it's definitely something I'd like to get. I don't know, more simulation oriented, but it's like the impact of changing it is so great. And one of the problems with speed is it's based on 40 times. And then, how do you get a 40 time for a player who's been in the league for 10, 12 years? Usually when you look it up, all you have is his combine 40 from 10 years ago. So, and it's hard to base it on just visual sight. So you don't have anything really to go on other than, your best guess, I guess. The other thing is, this is big for me. The whole idea of contact and how it slows you down is something that we're not good at. So if I'm running side by side, even with the hand fighting we put in this year, it's still my running at my max speed versus you running at your max speed. So to represent kind of the physicality of, a corner who gets beat but then recovers and just applies enough contact to not get pass interference, but to slow that receiver down enough to retain an advantageous position. That's not something we can do right now, and it's a very difficult thing to implement, but we think about it all the time.
You kind of switch gears, and this is probably going to feed into one of Neal's questions. Draft Champions has been a huge implementation in this game. It's something that seems so easy when you think about that concept of, here's what you need to do, 15 rounds, pick a player out of a set of 3. When you look at it in the game now, you say to yourself, why wasn't this in 10 years ago? It seems like such a smooth transition and concept from where you guys were with Madden Ultimate Team. Can you talk a little bit about implementing that into the game, whose concept that was, and how quickly it came to life?
That was all Colby Launchbaugh. He is the former creative director on MLB The Show, and you guys haven't probably heard that much from him because he was basically for the last couple of years building the Madden mobile brand from the ground up with a guy named Rob Hyder, who's the producer on that title. They brought Colby into Mutt. So Colby handles all the modes. He handles Mutt. He handles the digital business side. He handles, just recently this year, CFM, which is a massive job of epic proportions. But Colby, this Draft Champions is his brainchild. It was sort of a corporate initiative to somehow figure out something we could do with fantasy football. And what Colby came up with is that I shouldn't give all the credit to Colby. He works very tightly with a producer named Tom Lischke, who was a big part of this as well. And all the pieces you're going to come into place in a second when I describe this. So Colby's a big PC game player as well. I'm more of a console guy, but Colby plays Hearthstone, and he plays League of Legends, and he watches esports stuff. So I think his original genesis was merging the concept of the draft from Hearthstone with a fantasy football draft. And that sort of became the platform that ultimately became Draft Champions. Tom Lischke's background is from card trading. I can't remember exactly which one he was involved with. It might have been Magic the Gathering, like he was part of that group. So he comes from a card trading background. And these are both guys who are new within the last 3 years. So, and this is their...
So that's a great segue into this question here. You were mentioned, rack catching and speed rating and these pieces and the work that Colby's doing on Draft Champions, which has been, the response has been phenomenal that I've seen on that. But when other games like Halo or Call of Duty, Battlefield, other AAA titles come out, they feed off each other and drive kind of mechanics, play styles, and within the communities themselves, and that kind of drives the work that's being done on Destiny and other first-person shooters. With EA and Madden, You have focus groups and the loudness of the internet community, which I don't know how you would be able to glean anything off of. But how do you determine what modes to focus on or what mechanics to change without ostracizing or pissing off the community, which is a very easy thing to do?
Well, no matter what we do, we're going to ostracize and piss off someone. The audience is so big that, and so splintered as well. That's been a really tricky aspect of this job is, the MUT guys want things that are completely different from the CFM guys, and the online ranked people are a completely different breed. Everybody wants different things. Everybody has different priorities. It's been a very difficult thing to manage because usually in games, when you're working on Medal of Honor, you know exactly what they want. They want a World War II first-person shooter. When you're working on a racing game, you know what they want. But Madden splinters its audience so much based on the modes and the various ways of play that servicing everybody is extremely difficult. Now, what we've worked on since I've got there is exactly what I pitched to Cam Weber and Roy Harvey as the executive producer in my interview way back when I got the job. This is, I said, my X authentic football simulation. That's the X. And I said, and my pillars were like, it was blocking, war in the trenches. It was ball carrier, which we did in 25. It was making defense fun. And it was wide receiver DB interaction. And I'm not going to tell you what my number 5 was because that's next year. But yeah, we've stuck to that plan. Now, when you preceded this question by saying, you have focus tests and you have, I could give you a list a mile long of EA has this intense corporate structure, especially since Andrew Wilson's gotten there, about player first, about outreaching to the community, we study everything. We have patterns. We know what people are complaining about. In every single forum thread everywhere about Madden, through data and analytics that are popping back at us and telling us this is most important. This is what people are complaining about. This is what they're mad about. So yeah, all that information is accessible. The interesting part is filtering all that stuff and zeroing in on patterns that you need to attack. For example, I'd say coming out of the reviews this year and coming out of the post-launch feedback, the team has to take a very serious look at CFM and really figure out how to get that mode where it needs to be and make everybody happy with its functionality. Because right now, I think if you're going to look at Madden coming out of Madden 16, if I asked you guys, like, what are the 2 most important things that are sort of the weaknesses right now, you got to look at CFM and you got to look at commentary. And I think that's pretty universal across all reviews.
Yeah, a lot of people have talked about CFM negatively just because of the sterilness of it over the past few years. It doesn't seem to have any major changes. But that really leads into my next question to you, ironically enough. Now that you've seen the reviews, now that you've basically got a feel for how people have perceived the game, if you could point to one area that you could go back that maybe didn't get the attention it deserved this year, what would that be, and what changes would you make now?
Let's see. Man, there's a lot of different directions I could go with that. I'm pretty happy with what we ultimately chose as our priorities. I think if there's one thing I could change, I feel like the number of bugs that we had at launch, putting the 80 plus, 85 plus reviews aside, when people are upset because there's bugs in CFM that mean they can't start their franchise, or there's the offsides bug that is actually impacting functionally the outcome of games. I view those things as completely inexcusable, professionally unacceptable. They make me extremely angry. It's like, if you're going to go out there and pay $60, you expect the damn thing to work out of the box. And we've been doing this for 25 years. There is no excuse for us to come out of the gates with a stumble. We're all over it, and we're going to get it fixed, and we're going to get it fixed probably quicker than we've ever done before in the past. But from my perspective and for me internally, it really makes me angry and really focused and determined to make sure that never happens again.
I've got 2 possible next questions. The first one I didn't get to follow up because Ryan just jumped all over me. But the question was the follow up to that first question, like how do you determine what modes come and what mechanics to change? Your team seems extremely vetted and talented, right? And you mentioned Colby had experience with Hearthstone, League of Legends. Those games are really driving a lot of new market. Those MOBA games that came out of really nowhere over the last couple of years have been generating a lot of traffic, and the esports are really huge. So on individual team members, I'm sure, are coming to the table with ideas, yourself included. And how do you kind of determine what modes to focus on with those? Do they get balanced up against those focus groups, those algorithms that are in place? That's question one.
Yeah.
That's throwing your own team under the table. So the other one is marketing. Who doesn't want to throw marketing under the table?
All right, let me answer your first question first, and then you can answer me the marketing question, which I probably am going to neglect to answer. Yeah. So and now I'm stuck on the marketing. What was about the priorities?
Let me throw it out there just so you know, because it might be easier to answer. In terms of marketing, like how does the development team, again, who are they've got a lot of history. You've mentioned Medal of Honor series, which dates you significantly, but it makes me very confident that you understand the development process. When do you involve marketing? Like when does your development team interface with marketing to know what features and updates to leak or share when? Like when you roll out these new features like the draft champions, or when you're rolling out like changes to rack catching or speed ratings, how integrated is marketing? Are they an afterthought or are they integral to the process of development?
All right, so I'll dispel a myth before we start, and that myth is marketing does not tell us what to build, ever. Not in my time since I've been there. My responsibility is to pitch to marketing in what we call gate meetings, what the creative plan is for the year. And then they start thinking about, how could we package this? How could we message this? Is this going to be strong enough? If they have concerns in certain areas, they see the same data I do, so they kind of know what the community wants, and they propose features from time to time. But generally, they stay in the loop throughout the year, and but mostly the gate meetings are what we use to kind of tell them what we're doing, tell them if anything fell off or fell out of scope or whatever, or wasn't no longer a part of the plan, and they just build their marketing plan. Like Air Supremacy was actually my idea this year, and they changed it to Be the Playmaker, and it ended up that both kind of stuck. I saw both being used in reviews, and it's fine. I'm cool with that. But yeah, it's huge. They're a huge organization, and the Madden especially is gigantic. But they do a good job. The first question about priorities and how we choose what we do. There's a lot of factors that go into it. We get a lot of feedback. We listen to reviews. We do a whole Metacritic review aggregate analysis where we look at what our weakest areas are. But generally speaking, we have a 5-year plan. We've had a 5-year plan since I've been there, and generally speaking, we have stuck to it. And that plan is pretty much filled out for the next three years. I don't see that we'll deviate from that much. It's kind of a group decision. Mostly the EP, the senior producer, Sean Grady, myself, Colby, a couple other producers. We make decisions about what's in and what's out.
Having said that, then, I guess, to kind of wrap this part of the interview up, when you look to next year, knowing that things are in place, knowing the feedback that you've gotten already from the community, what do you think that one big push, without obviously leading too much for Madden 17, what do you believe that next push is going to be just overall in terms of realism? What's the one area that you want to make sure gets changed going forward to provide that pop, that new game feel that hopefully, people got with Madden 15? I'm sorry, Madden 16. I keep Freudian slipping these things.
It's okay. I'm definitely not going to pitch you the creative for 17, but I think as a team, we need to focus on, I'd say, you might not agree with me on all of this, but I'd say gameplay's in a pretty good spot right now. I'd say presentation's in a really good spot right now. I'm very happy with the graphics right now. Audio, we definitely have room to improve in that area. I think Mutt is really strong. DC, obviously fantastic. CFM definitely needs to be an area of focus for us. No question in my mind. So, outside of going into specifics, I think those would be my areas.
All right, well, Rex, I definitely appreciate you coming on and talking to us. Hopefully, we'll have you on again in the future. As always, like I said, everybody, feel free to leave your criticism down at the bottom. And if you have any other questions for Rex, maybe we'll get to them in the next interview.